I haven't seen this.
I know.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way, I enjoyed your training.
Thanks.
It was good to hear.
Adam, we're on, so whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, I missed it. I told Scott.
Yeah.
All right.
We're going to call this meeting to order. Michelle, can you please call roll?
Yes, Mr. Pahovich,
Here.
Mr. McNulty,
Here.
Ms. Travellis,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Here.
and Mr. Pierce.
Here.
We have a full court.
All right. Old business. So we're here tonight to discuss the minor amendments to the zoning resolution, Article 20 of Route 23 Corridor Overlay District, as well as rezoning application ZON-21-05 Evans Farms Planned Commercial District and ZON-21-06 Evans Farms Single Family Plan Residential District. We will start with the resolution, the amendments to Article 20 of Route 23. Holly, do you have anything to discuss with this?
Sure, thank you and good evening. This is coming before you as a request to look at some of the prohibited uses within the RCOD. When we drafted the original text, there were prohibitions on auto-oriented uses within the mixed-use development sub-areas. We wanted those areas to be walkable and focus on pedestrian orientation, but they were not listed as prohibited within the commercial sub-area. Over time, as we have seen applications come through, it's something that we are looking at considering adding in this prohibition to gas stations within the RCOD. What this means is it doesn't mean that gas stations are prohibited within that corridor altogether. It just means that they are not permitted within the overlay pull down option, so get the expedited review process that the overlay allows. So they would continue to be allowed under the regular commercial zoning if that is the underlying zoning for the property. So what is listed here is removing the term gas station from the auto-oriented definition, adding a definition for gas service stations to section 20.12, and then listing those as prohibited within the overlay. And then also adding a definition for truck service centers. Those have always been prohibited, but thought that it would be better to clarify and better define that, so I added that in. The only thing that I did question when I was doing this was whether or not we wanted to strike oil changing facilities, new and used car sales, auto body repair, car washes, car repair facilities, and other similar establishments from that definition of auto-oriented uses. I left it in there right now because I think the direction I was given was just the gas stations. But when I looked at that, I thought they're so similar. Maybe that's something that the township might want to consider, striking those in that definition and prohibiting them as well. So I will leave that open to you for discussion. But that's what's being proposed tonight.
So if this were approved, this would prohibit all those things you just talked about as far as gas stations and such out of
If I added those other uses in, if I struck those out of that definition, then it would prohibit them as well.
In the overlay district.
In the overlay
not
district.
entirely.
Right, but in the overlay district, which is essentially all of Route 23 here in Orange Township.
If they choose to pull that down, the regular commercial zoning district would still allow those uses.
How would the regular commercial zoning district override the 23 corridor?
So the 23 corridor overlay district is just what it describes. It's an overlay. So the way the Ohio Revised Code reads is that the underlying zoning continues to be in operation until such time the applicant chooses to pull down that cloud. Once they pull it down, then that underlying zoning goes away. So if somebody wanted to come in and do one of these uses, they could still do it under that original commercial zoning if their property was zoned that. If it wasn't, they could go through the rezoning process to the regular commercial district. But they'd have to go through that full process, that full rezoning process if they need to do that. What the overlay does is provide that expedited review process and gives an incentive to uses that are desirable within the township. And that's why we're looking to clarify some of this, because are we giving incentives to some of these uses that may not be as desirable as some of the others?
Well, that was the reason for the 23 overlay, is to make it simple for the developers to come in and say, here, I know what this is, I've already read it, let's come in, let's do this. I can't see anybody going with the old zoning. I almost can't see a reason why anybody would do this. Okay, so then if this gets approved, lots of other automotive functions get prohibited in the 23 overlay. Now, I'm opposed to that. I think if 23 were a different kind of road, a 2-lane, something that was a really walkable district, I could hear more opposition, but the way it is.
It's only gas stations, that's it, right now. As it's written right now, it's only gas stations. And part of the reason, quite frankly, is I think the trustees are starting to get feedback from the constituency that they don't really particularly want to see more gas stations along there, or at least the expedited process. To me, it's the biggest ramification is simply the process in which an applicant applies. They still are entitled, as Holly pointed out, but from a legal perspective, it gives the zoning commission and the trustees more flexibility under a standard rezoning to either approve or deny a rezoning request. Whereas if it's under the overlay process, the expedited process, it's very difficult for a township, if all the boxes are checked, to deny an application, and it's administrative. And really, so it comes down to a policy decision with respect to that particular use. So I think that's just some feedback that the trustees have received, which is one of the reasons why this amendment was generated. But it's just gas stations right now. I think based upon some of the comments at the end of last meeting, we kind of got an indication that the zoning commission wasn't really interested in expanding that at this time with, the oil change facilities, the auto body shops, the car lots. So we left it as is.
So if anyone that currently has an application,
It wouldn't apply. No.
Yeah, because if it's prohibited in a 23 overlay, no one's going to apply for it because it's already prohibited. They just wouldn't go there because they're not going to fight that battle. The battle of the overlay force make it easy. If it's already prohibited, they just stay away. Well, that would be really prohibited.
But
and it would
yeah, but it doesn't. So it's not. I'm not going to say it's common, but I have numerous times had in townships that have overlays where an applicant has chosen not to take advantage of an overlay, but has rezoned to a different PUD or to a standard zoning district. It's certainly their right to do that. But ultimately it's a policy decision to be made, and I just wanted you to understand the history behind it a little bit. And it's a living document. I mean, this thing's going to be tweaked moving forward as well, and it's a living, breathing document.
So can I ask a question, Holly? The overlay sort of is an expedited review process. It sort of circumvents the zoning commission. You put it in there. We have one chance to review it, make comments. Nothing's binding. It goes straight to the trustees to vote. So that's the appeal of it to developers. That's the benefit for developers. What's the benefit for Orange Township for the overlay district?
The anticipation is to get the commercial development in here to obtain the tax base and increase that commercial tax base.
Okay, is that the only, was that the goal?
Yes, that was the goal.
Okay, so I guess this is what.
And mixed use, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and mixed
We didn't
Well,
have,
see, that's sort of my take. If the
Yeah.
goal is just to get development in here, then banning gas stations isn't gonna promote development. If the goal is to get a preferred type of development, like mixed use and giving them incentives for that type of development, then removing the gas stations makes sense.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right.
And so that's what I'm getting at, is that if you're a developer and you want to build a gas station or a used car lot or whatever, you still can. You just have to go through the traditional zoning
Correct.
process of rezoning your plot of land or whatever, the land you're considering buying. You can still do that through the traditional zoning process. You will just not pull down the cloud,
Right.
which means you will have to go through the long process of several meetings before the zoning commission will haggle, finagle, whatever you want to call it, to come up with something that we think is suitable for the township. But so the overlay is for the developer, it's an expedited process. For us, it means, if what I'm hearing correctly, it gives us a benefit of controlling that development in terms of mixed use, in terms of design guidelines and things of that nature. So if that is the case, if the purpose of this overlay is to promote a mixed use development, then I have no problems with limiting gas stations as long as they're still allowed under the traditional zoning.
I end up still being opposed because of the nature of Route 23. I know ODOT would love to change it, I've read all those things, they would like to get all this traffic off 23, take it somewhere else because it's too slow, too many cars, too many traffic lights. Yeah, I get it, but where are you going to put it? I just don't see any of this changing. We're at 30,000 people here in Orange Township. I view lots of these things as conveniences for 30,000 people. We're not a mixed use walkable. 23 is never going to be mixed use walkable. I don't ever envision that occurring.
And then my case would be, then what's the purpose of the overlay?
Well, the overlay was always just about speeding the process up and taking it out of our control. Sorry, but I saw that for exactly
So
what
if
it
you
was.
think the process was taking it out of control, you're fine with taking gas stations out of our control?
No, I'm not. No, that's why I'm leaving. I want them to still be a part because I still think that's a convenience portion of this community.
Following that argument then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to this, is the overlay allows for, as Holly stated, an expedited review process. The more things that are pulled out of that, essentially, if you were to look at it like that, it's going to go through typical zoning. Like, it would go through how things would go through prior to even having an overlay district. So they would come in, present it. I mean, so rather than it coming in here and going through the overlay, it would have to go through us. So it's still an option. Developers still have the ability to develop a gas station. They would just have to go through the typical zoning process.
I want to see the chart and see how much of it is already there, typically zoned as commercial. To where that would fall under the. That's what I'm afraid of. Not knowing what that land is. How much of it is really zoned commercial, or still zoned FR1 or something else, to where this zone commercial wouldn't even be a factor.
Right.
Because they have to come in and rezone it, and that's not going to happen. So I'd want to, before I'd ever agree to that, I would want to know how much is already zoned commercial on 20.
But if it's already zoned commercial, then nobody has jurisdiction except for the zoning office, and what they would come in is simply file their, request their certificate of zoning compliance, and if they meet all the applicable area standards, they can build it anyway. There's not going to be any review at all.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether they would need variances from the BZA, but my guess is they're probably going to have to maybe rezoned to some type of PD, commercial PD anyway. If they don't meet if they can't fit into a general, straight, standard commercial district. So it would come in front of this board. But my guess is that if they have that ability now, they would have already taken advantage of it. That's my opinion, but.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's two things for this board to evaluate here. Is one, exactly what Christine just said, where it's, we can shift it in. I mean, they still have an opportunity to do it. We can shift it into the zoning standard process by doing exactly what this is asking tonight, which is striking gas stations from. I mean, the mixed use part of the RCOD already prohibits gas stations, so now the commercial would too. So anytime that someone would have to go through commercial gas stations, it would just come through just like Turkey Hill, through the normal process. The second part of this, I think that we should take into consideration is the amount of pushback from the residents on recent, I guess, gas stations and things coming through the community. So if it was to stay within the RCOD, in my opinion, I think we would have less control over what that process looks like going through the RCOD than saying yes to this and saying let's take it into a deep dive review, as the board typically would do on a project like this, and pull it out of the RCOD.
And then the public would be able to comment.
Correct.
Or have more of an opportunity to comment their feelings upon said gas station or convenience gas station or whatever.
But they have the public has the right to comment either way, right?
At the trustee level, not at the zoning.
But ultimately,
Just at the trustee level, not at the commission level.
but ultimately, if it's removed from the overlay, it gives the residents the right of referendum.
So.
Yeah, you can't referendum in the RCOD.
No.
Oh.
No.
So that eliminates a 30-day referendum period.
Not for the overlay. So when you float the cloud for an overlay, that, even though it doesn't change the underlying zoning, that act of floating the cloud is treated as a rezoning for purposes of referendum. So once Orange Township floated the cloud, the residents had 30 days to referendum the cloud. Once that 30 days went by, residents lose their right of referendum for any application that comes in after that. That's where I was basically trying to say the review process becomes much more complicated, because at that point it becomes an administrative appeal for any application. So I have to, are all the boxes checked? Whereas in a rezoning, as you guys know, it's more of a policy-based decision that the zoning commission and the trustees make. And then even though it may meet the comprehensive plan and all the technical requirements of the code, the higher revised code gives the right to the residents to referendum that decision. That is removed with the overlay. And that's another reason. And I do want to point out again, it's not uncommon. I'm going to use Berkshire Township up in, they've had an overlay for quite some time. And they just are going through the process after years talking about what they like, the uses they like, uses they don't like. Maybe we don't want car lots south of 36, 37. Maybe we want to see them up here. So again, this is going to be a reoccurring theme that you're going to see, that you're going to be a part of, and I think this is just kind of the first urgent one that I think that the trustees were looking at. But there are going to be future discussions in terms of process with
and I'm getting ready to go through that process. And that's what
Correct. So
it's almost like what's the rush on this specific one? Is it that we have we get more applications, or we hand that more people want.
We don't have any other applications pending, but that is a concern.
You know, my thought is if it's designed for what it's designed for currently, and we're getting ready to go through this process altogether, I don't know if it's appropriate necessarily to pull this one out at this point. And the trustees ultimately have the authority based on the feedback from the community. And, we don't want that, then they should turn it down if they get the feedback.
Well, and I think that's one of the issues, because it's from a legal perspective, it's harder to turn an application down in the overlay as opposed to an application that is rezoning.
Is there an appeal process or something? And the trustee comes to the overlay, trustee say, no, we don't want that, and we should go get locked.
The applicant has the right to a direct appeal to the Court of Common Pleas.
And then the trustees have to justify how to come to this conclusion.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would, I think, rather pull this back into the standard zoning process, and now that knowing the referendum part of it, allowing the residents to, if it is such a hot topic, allowing them to have the ability to referendum the case if they see, fit to do that. So.
Can we table this one, we're meeting next week?
Well, that is to discuss the zoning text, not necessarily the RCOD, or is it everything?
It's just simply awarding the contract for the consultant to move forward with the zoning rewrite. We're not talking about.
Right, but that is for just the zoning, or standard zoning, not the, or is it everything? Is it? It's not the RCOD.
Well, the
Or is it
RCOD is part of our
yeah,
resolution,
yeah.
so we could read.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that was actually my question as well. So when they're rewriting the zoning text, they can also rewrite the overlay RCOD as well.
We can revisit it then.
We can
Yes.
revisit it then.
We will be looking at every chapter anyways, so.
But again, my concern is that people know that we're doing this now. And my concern is that from a legal perspective, I don't want a rush of applications being filed, and I think there's a distinct possibility that may happen.
Can we retro apply it?
No,
No.
that's my legal concern. If that helps. And again, ultimately it's up to the trustees, and you're simply making a recommendation. And if you feel uncomfortable from a policy perspective, and you'd like to see it in, then that's, I understand that. And it's a vote not to recommend changing it.
All right, if we vote on this today, and then we decide to make changes one way or the other when we rewrite the zoning text, that can easily be done, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And that's,
So when we rewrite the zoning text, be it 6 months or however long the consultant will take, we can then address this for like the third time of, yes, we want cars, no, we don't want cars, yes, we want gas stations, no, we don't want gas stations, oil change.
That goes for
everything.
all of our districts. We should be
Okay.
revisiting them. I mean, things change, trends are different, and, this is new. And when Holly and I put this together, we knew we were going to face changes really early on. And what's here today seemed more urgent, and then we would be going through the whole chapter again.
but we've had numerous conversations on things that now that it's gone through, we've had a handful that have gone through, that, there's been conversations of things that we can do, even from a process perspective to make it better.
And we have a running list. that we're keeping.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is more so a preventive measure, since it's the topic of conversation, to prevent the influx of applications coming in in regards to this matter.
From my perspective, yes.
All right, well, I guess based on this conversation, can I get a recommendation to approve the text amendment to Article 20, Route 23 Corridor Overlay District, RCOD?
All right, I'll do it. Motion by Ms. Trabellis to recommend to the Board of Township Trustees, the board, the approval to amend the text of Article 20 of Orange Township Zoning Resolution, Route 23 Corridor Overlay District, RCOD, upon finding that it is in the interest of the public convenience, comfort, prosperity, or general welfare, and is sufficiently in accordance with the comprehensive plan. The latest version of the amendment consists of the changes to the Article 20 text labeled as First Amendment of the ROCD and dated
Today, right?
Okay. Yep.
It's today's date? Okay. September 14th, 2021. Further move that the zoning secretary shall certify a copy of this resolution to the board.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Trabellis to recommend approval of text amendments to Article 20 for the Route 23 Corridor Overlay District. Second by Mr. Bohavich. Those voting, Mr. Bohavich,
Yes.
Mr. McNulty,
No.
Ms. Trabellis,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce,
No.
and Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Good debate. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next on the list, rezoning application ZON-21-05. Actually, Michelle, do you want to handle these separately or as one?
We can do it together.
Yep, okay. And ZON-21-06, Evans Farm. Michelle, do you want to start us off with staff comments?
Yes. Thank you. So we did receive the revised submittal on September 7th, and staff and our council did review the revisions. So we did have additional comments. First, we did receive one residential email of concern that I did provide a copy of you all, and I believe I forwarded that in my email yesterday. I think overall the concerns that we heard, when people would call in or come in and ask about it is questioning with the formatting, which is what, Tony and I have been working on for the past several months on trying to consolidate a lot of the text. And, either I'm happy with how the format's becoming into it, but I think some of the residents' concerns were, how do you know exactly what's being changed, or are they trying to, are we trying to sneak something in, or, we're not trying to hide anything with this new formatting. It is reduced significantly. So after hearing from the residents, I did ask Tony Ironman to submit a red line version of both the original single family and planned commercial applications, and he did provide copies today. I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, so we will review that. So I think that'll help. I think that'll help a lot of the residents' concerns too. So we'll make sure that's sent out to anybody who requests it. I think I have a couple other things. That's all right, Adam.
Yeah, please.
So another question came up was involving the density for the commercial area. I think I understand the density will be increasing, but I think that we want to kind of have a better understanding of what that'll actually look like. I see that the density per acre has increased, but as far as the amount of units, I guess what type of quantity are we expecting as the changes in that? So that's a question that was brought up. Should I just go down the list and then we can kind of talk from there? Okay.
Yeah.
As far as signage goes, I did ask Tony to Tony did provide a matrix for the signage standards, which I do think is a great idea. My only concern is that since when we asked for the narrative in the beginning, it didn't specify the signage standards, so I would like clarity to make sure all the signage standards are either the same as what was before, or to note all the differences that are made in the text. And I did have another thing, that there's signage text in here too, so I don't know if the matrix is more of a reference or as an additional part to the signage text, or is it, I don't know if it speaks to each other or if it's just an exhibit for us to, as an example. The other, a couple more things. So temporary events. I did talk to our roads and fire department about this, and as of now, when Evans Farm does have an event, they do seek a block party application. And I know in the last conversation, we knew that there was going to be several events happening in Evans Farm, but because these streets are going to be public, it seemed like our roads department wanted to be aware of them. So with a farmer's market, for instance, if it was something that were to happen weekly, if you could submit an annual application or a quarterly one, just so we would be aware of those events, I think that would be a good compromise from staff's perspective. I know that's how the text is written. It says, and let's see, on page 6 of the matrix, it does note for any outdoor or for community markets, appropriate approvals may be required from HOA, POA, Orange Township, and/or. I just want to ensure that the township would receive applications for those events. So
that's always been our intent.
okay. I noticed that food trucks it was in here, and I can't recall if it was part of the original application.
It was.
Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. I know we're trying to figure out how to handle that. I've been going to some training sessions on people like to stick random food trucks places, so we're just trying to figure out if there should be an administrative approval for that. I don't know if you presented at one of those, Pete. As far as the alley widths, so we did reach out to the fire department for the widths. I know the applicant was proposing a 15-foot alley width. In order for us to do that, the fire department has to seek a variance from the state fire marshal. They have began that process. However, it is not ready to this day. And after talking to the applicant, it's my understanding that they would want to remove it from the text entirely and to keep it as is.
Your whole list before we respond, or?
Yeah, I have one more thing.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Sure.
Which is good.
The last thing I had, I noticed that Jennings Sports Park is not mentioned in here. I think, that is a big part of Evans Farm development, and I think it needs to be outlined in this somehow, especially since we did have that amendment at one point.
What's that not mentioned?
Jennings Sports Park?
It's not mentioned in the text.
Is that?
That's it.
Is that okay? Tony, I guess name and address.
Good evening.
And then
I'm Tony Ironman, Evans Farmland Development Company. This is my partner Dan Griffin. We're both at 1550 Lewis Center Road, Suite B. With us this evening, we have Kevin Kirschner, who's hiding back there by the post. He is our engineer and able to respond to our neighbors' comments in regards to traffic and traffic impact. And we've had a lot of conversations with the county engineer on that, and I think we'll have addressed that before we leave tonight. Just kind of an introduction. Back in 2016, we received our original approval on Evans Farm, both planned commercial and single-family planned residential. Over the course of several years, we've had a number of amendments. In November of 2020, which is about 10 months ago, in one of our amendment hearings for the trustees, they requested that we work with Michelle and the staff to visit our zoning text and try to make it more clear, more concise. And probably right after the first year, Michelle and I started a meeting. I don't know if we've met once a month. Seems like sometimes we met more frequently and sometimes less. But over the course of the better part of 7 or 8 months, we've managed to take 140 pages of zoning text and boil it down to 35 pages or so. What we'll do tonight is we'll go through some of that. Our plans for tonight are to review, on August 30th, I think it was, we met with Michelle and staff and received comments from our first meeting. We can respond to those first, and we can go through Michelle's brief list here and respond to those. If you'd like, we can respond to the neighbor's email, which would be easy, and we'd be pleased to do that. And then for the topper of the evening, we're going to go through the red lines, which is all those pages, and review all those and show how we've consolidated all that down into those 35 pages or so. And if that's okay with the zoning commission, we can get started on that. On the 30th, we met with Michelle. I'm sorry, I forget your name.
Brett.
Brett, sorry about that. I won't forget it again. And we went through these 22 items on the memo that are pretty clear. What we'll do is just go through 1 through 22. And item 1, we added the outdoor community market to the permitted uses, accessory and temporary uses on page 6 of the, when I refer to the pages, I'm referring to the binder. Page 6. Not to add the two together, but our attention has always been that we still have to apply with the township. The intent of sharing information, we know sometimes we're in public roads and things like that, so it's important that the township knows what's happening. So it's always been our intention that we can do that. So we've added that. And please, if you have any questions, jump in, because I'm going to try, we got a lot of things to get through this evening and we'd like to.
I have a question, I'm
Sure.
sorry. One other thing I forgot to mention on page 7 of the matrix. I've noticed that some of the uses were considered conditional under the no permit required. So I guess from a staff's point, I'm not sure how we would be able to enforce that if there's no permit required. So I mean, I'm fine if the board's okay with it, having those as, well, I know construction trailers, we do typically require a permit for that.
Right.
So we might,
Most of the, other than adding the outdoor community market, these uses have pretty much been taken from the approved zoning text previously, but we don't, with that, we always thought there was an application for that anyhow, so.
We currently get permits.
well, that's, but
We
the way
didn't
it's.
even know the streets are.
No,
still
you're right. Yeah, and so how it's listed, it says no permit is required.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if that's something you are proposing to not have permits for anymore.
We'll give you the preference. I mean, it was approved that way, but
Okay.
if it's important, and I think it is important for the township to know what's going on, certainly we apply it. We could write in there to amend that to have permits required. Item 2, we met with Chief McNeil and Lieutenant Clark on the 30th, or I'm sorry, not on the 30th. Last week, yes. And we agreed to work together to pursue the variance on the width of the alleys. We agreed also to work with them on the geometrics of the aprons as they come from the public roads into the alleys. Because at that point, we realized there's a timing issue. Our intentions are not to be delayed, or we really like to get approved as quickly as we can, so we can move forward. We've had a lot of items that have been delayed, a lot of phases and things like that have been delayed based on the zoning text and the delay for the township trustees' request to consolidate this down. It's critical that we move forward quickly on this. So what we are going to do is we're going to request a withdrawal, reduce the alley width. We're going to continue to pursue the variance. And if the state fire marshal gives us the variance, then we'll come back before you and request the amendment, specifically that. It's just our expectations are folks who have had contact and working with that whole process have said it's not that fast. So our intentions are to, if we formally request to withdraw the reduction of the alley width, with your understanding it will return if we get the variance approved by the fire marshal at a later date to amend our zoning text there.
And Tony, that's for 16 feet? Is that, or 15
yeah,
feet?
I can't
Yeah.
remember what it is in the text, but it's currently approved at 20.
Yep.
So yeah.
Okay.
Item number 3, section 21-05, water and common should be an exact replica from the rezoning application. We took that exact text, I think, Brett, where Jeff sent it to me. I took it and inserted it in as the first line in the water and common section. So we're good there. Item 4 is to ensure duplexes shall follow the same architectural standards as single-family homes. In the zoning text on page, section 1, I think it's first page, page 2, it says in the conditions that they shall meet the duplexes shall comply with all Evans Farm single-family architectural landscape development guidelines. I think that's exactly what we were talking about, so should be good there. Item 5, include language in regards to the clubhouses, which we went over with Michelle. We included it into the permitted uses. On page 5. Under community, civic, public, and institutional. Listed basically the third line down in clubhouse and wellness. Item 6, for under street parking area open space, there was a duplicated statement. We removed that. Try our best to catch them all and just let one slide every once in a while, so we apologize. Item 7, under signage, flags, and banners, remove C PCD development text. It's actually supposed to say C general development text, which refers back to the previous section. And we made that correction as well. The item 8, staff questions the 0 setback. And section 2, we have since added in there a 6-foot setback from property line for detached units. Attached units, obviously, like what's out there being built right now, the attached units have obviously no setback, but if they're detached, there's a 6-foot from property line. If they're on the same lot, then the fire code is going to govern that separation. The item number 9, staff will work with legal counsel on best practices in handling temporary events, including farmers markets. We'll keep working with you on that. There was no action for us to make any amendment there. And then item number 10 is the same, staff questions regulating satellite dishes. We'll further discuss with legal counsel. The satellite dishes were part of the architectural guidelines in 2016 that were approved. We not made any changes to them. So if you'd like them in, great. If not, that's fine too. It's just one of those things that as soon as we don't have it in there as one of our architectural statements, someone's going to want putting up on their front porch. And that's probably our only fear of having that removed. But we can work with you on that. Item number 12, remove the block types in the tables. We've done that. If you look at the section 1 and section 2. However, in the red line, this is the benefit, that there's the benefit of 2 days of cramming all the red lines in. We found a typo, and on page 3, under eating and drinking places, we refer to that lot type 3 and permitted accessory use in lot type 4 in the condition. So all we're going to do is ask that lot type 3, quote unquote, be removed and put in there the oval area. And lot type 4, quote unquote, remove that and take out and insert in there Lewis Center Road area.
Have you made that change, or is that what you're requesting today?
I've done the red line in the last 2 days.
Okay.
The red lines in my eyes reflect the red lines on the paper.
Okay.
So, no, we haven't made the amendment, but it's, we, like, getting approval, we'll ask for that to be a condition for approval. It's a pretty simple amendment, or correction. Item 13, for monument or ground signs, please include the language to support as such signs meet all standards. No conditional use is required. We've added that on page 29. 14, clarify setbacks for column signs. We out of a couple items in here, and we think it was questions and meeting with Michelle and Brett on this, we ended up with the sign restrictions matrix. And I think that resulted in something very handy, and it's this coupled with the text and the signage part back in section 6 work together very nicely. They complement one another, where one has a setback and the other is descriptive.
So the matrix is actually part of the text?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everything in the binder is part of the text. Item 15, provide maximum square footage for column signs. And we've done that. 6 foot width, so 6 foot square, it's a square column sign. If it's round, what I did is I basically took the diagonal of a 6 foot square, and it's 8.5 feet or so, or thereabouts. So we said 8 foot diameter if it's a round sign. So, we had that. 16, provide a limit amount of maximum square footage for wall signs per tenant. And we've done that. The issue is, and Michelle and we had this discussion on this, some tenants, like our building number 1, the first tenant in has 3 bays, and it's pretty substantial. It's not half the building, but it's a sizable portion. We can't have one sign for 3 bays and have one sign for 1 bay. So we tried to address that the best we could. We said 1 wall sign per 22 feet of linear feet, and the bays are about 22 feet. So 22 to 24, depending on where the columns and the structural engineers got their jollies and put the columns in. But that's, the intent is every bay has one. And as we said from day one, using Uptown Westerville is a really good example of one of our targets of what we wanted this to look like. We walked it many times in the last 2 months, especially in the last month. You go to graders and those things, those places like that, they're about every 22 feet. And every bay seems to have one if they want. If not, some of them have awnings, some have other signs. But they tend to be pretty common like that. 17, staff questions the maximum square footage of vehicular blade signs as it is proposed to be larger than the monument sign. We had a really good conversation on this. I grew up in Columbus and down right outside of German Village there was a restaurant called, this dates me, but there used to be a restaurant called Reed's down on the near east side, I guess, would be an easy place to do it. Say it. And they had a sign that was on the corner of the building diagonally projecting now, basically an oversized blade sign that ran the height of the building. And Signage and BZ Evans and we think there's an opportunity for that to kind of bring it back to that old style of community signage. It's not backlit, it's all front lighted. How that marries in with the blade sign, we struggle. So what we ended up doing is creating another sign named corner multi-story signage. And that's on this list, on the matrix. It's intended to be specific to a corner of a building, or that application. It's intended to be the height of the building pretty much. Obviously, it's not going to extend to the ground, but it's going to extend to the bottom of the first floor, or the top of the first floor, bottom of the second floor. It's usually pretty narrow and very vertical, and that's where the new corner multi-story signage. And what I realized is it is a blade sign, so I should probably wrote in there blade sign, multi-story blade sign, but that's what that is. And that was in response to the maximum square footage of the vehicular blade sign. It really is more of a vehicular oriented sign, where most blade signs are right above the door. They're very much pedestrian oriented. So that separation caused that separation in signage. Number 18, staff questions if there are standards for window glass signage. We went back into the text and pulled what we could out of it, and then we came back in and added more. The window signage, one sign per window on the first floor, one sign per office unit on the second floor. Doors and window signs adjacent to doors, window signs adjacent to doors may include multiple messages. For example, I believe it's Bag of Nails in Westville, Graders has it too. Has the name Graders, but also has their hours of operation. You need that still applies in our text that taped-in signs and things like that on the windows are at least prohibited. So,
I have a question on that. For the window signage, so if it is one sign per floor, I mean, could they theoretically do a sign to cover one sign to cover their
one
entire,
sign per unit?
or just to cover their entire window?
Oh, okay.
I'm just, is that what you were looking for?
No, it's the typical gold leaf kind of look where has the name of the place on it. You can see through it to the operations side.
Okay. I guess because there wasn't a limit to the sign size or percentage of the window, so I didn't know if they could theoretically cover their whole window with a massive poster board, I guess.
We want to make that what percentage we can. It's typically, I mean, there's very little illustration other than the name of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I would recommend that so you don't get a window cling that covers up the whole window.
You want to say like 20% covered?
Whatever you feel comfortable with. We just want to prevent the
And we would too.
the whole window plastered with like a poster.
Like a wrap, like
Like a cling, yeah, exactly.
we wouldn't let it happen either, but I agree with you.
Are you gonna have your own association that monitors this? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the will stay, obviously, we're architect, I mean, this is critical for all of us.
Yeah, I can see it being critical for you because you've got a look you want to maintain. I love
It's
it.
beautiful, yeah.
I love it. You know, it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to have the right people that are gonna be on that same page with you
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
to maintain it, to set it up, yes.
No, we'll be. So we move to 20?
Sure.
Because we've already found people like to cheat with
20%
that.
sounds like a reason, especially it's usually letters, and it's very little logo involved. So I just keep thinking, walking down Sandusky Street in Delaware, on the second floor above the old Delaware County Bank buildings, Shade and Shade. That's all it says is Shade and Shade, and it's been there for, I don't know how old Mike and Dave are, but they're pretty old. I would say that with them here because I'd have great fun jabbing. But, yeah, that's, 20% would be very generous, in fact.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have to write some parameters around it, just because we've already know that people will push those on you,
Yeah.
yes.
Item 19, provide definition and identification sign. On page 30 of the zoning text, we added in that line item A, identification signage is defined to be limited to include the name of the establishment, the establishment's logo and/or slogan, and the address of the establishment. That's it. If we don't add, that's a good point. If you don't have that in there, heavens knows what we'll end up with on the identification sign. And we just, it's a very good point. Item 20, staff would like to further discuss murals with the commission. Should it be under art or permitted use or treated as signage? It's been our position in just walking through the short north, murals as a whole are art on the walls. If the zoning commission would favor it this way, we could say that it's art unless there's a name referencing the a commercial use or something like that in the art. But just walking through the short north, wherever there's murals on the wall, whether it's American Gothic or whether it's some very creative new look, it's just been art. It's been decoration on the side of usually a old brick wall that's had a building torn down next to it. It needs a little bit of spicing up just to hide the eyesore.
Is the mural approved by someone in advance, or is it just?
It would have to be approved as part of the BOF, Business Association. Item 21, staff believes reducing the setback for monument signs with internal roads is acceptable. Staff recommends maintaining the setback at 21 feet along major roads such as Lewis Center Road North for the fire changing. We agree, and we've added it in page 9, section 2, 21 feet and 10-foot setback for the internal roads. Item 22, staff requests digital copy of the Evans Farm architectural standards. Please note this will be treated as a resource, not part of the new development text. Staff received out of the office a digital file of the architectural guidelines, and we're pleased to share them. We just don't necessarily need to have everybody out there with them coming up with them. And the other thing happens if you're trying to chase other communities' architectural standards down, some of them are just impossible to get to. And that's because they have their look, and it's very much it's very much their signature. We like that. So. And if someone wants the information, we'd be happy to sit down and talk with them about it one-on-one. But just making it public is not really where we want to be. Any questions on those first 22?
Yeah, actually, I do have one, and it's in regards to the wall-mounted signage. So I guess I agree with the logic and wanting to, you have a tenant that's taking up 3 or 4 of these bays to have the ability to have multiple signs, but I would say I would like to see a limitation on, so each bay, is 88 square foot roughly if you were to read this. If we could do, with a max of 200 square feet or something like that, to where so you're not getting this, 3 88 square foot signs at each bay, where, they could maybe have a couple signs or even 3 if they choose, but, 200 square foot max or something like that. And I don't know if the board agrees with that or not. Just a suggestion. Yeah.
So you just don't have one big sign plastered all across the building.
Yeah,
Right.
it's great. We can add 200 square feet in there, right in the area square foot site to sign into.
And that would be per bay or
No.
per
No,
tenant?
Per tenant. So, yeah, I'm sorry, that, yeah, I
It
failed
would
to
be
mention
limited
that, per
to,
tenant.
the tenant would be limited, so he couldn't, or she couldn't, they couldn't have one big continuous sign, but if they want, it would be limited in square footage.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
That's all I had for signage.
I'm having for signage, I'll probably, if I could, and I don't know when the proper place to bring this up. I know we had talked last time about standards for the duplexes, and it looks like those are basically now incorporated into your architectural guidelines. Okay. And Michelle has a copy of those said guidelines, and you are
Yes,
comfortable
she
with
does.
those said guidelines?
Yes, she does.
We do share them, so.
And there would be, and then help what we're discussing tonight.
Okay,
The worst thing that we could do would be to approve something like that and then come in and do something that would not be complimentary to the community. So, like you, we're very much focused on that as well.
okay, so you are obviously aware of the history with duplexes in the township and the need for an architectural standard.
Yes.
And Michelle is comfortable with said architectural standards written in those guidelines.
And the town architect still has to review everything in single-family planned residential. So the duplexes would go through that exact same process. And as we added in zoning text for our submission a while back on this amendment, in the first page of the first paragraph of section 4, our enforcement policy is the zoning permit requires the town architect's approval letter. And then the occupancy permit requires another approval letter to confirm that what was proposed is actually built. So that's our way of enforcing it. The duplexes are going to comply with single family as well. So
Okay.
in the township, it should not, based on this, should not issue the zoning permit or the occupancy permit. If you don't get a zoning permit, you're not going to get the occupancy permit anywhere close. But the township shouldn't issue either without the letters from the town architect. So that gives the township that comfort that this is being complied with as well.
Okay, so your town architect or your Evans Farm architect will certify that any of these designs meet your standards.
Yes. We can go, I suppose now would be a good time, if any wasn't on the list, but we can certainly address Michelle's items that she had as well. Michelle, if I don't get these quite right, it's because my writing's terrible, not because you didn't describe it well enough. The first item you mentioned was the density of a PCD and types of multifamily. The density of the PCD, the neighbor who wrote the letter brought up the rezoning something from one thing to another. And that's really not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is what we said 2015 on or 14 on. We're trying to develop a mixed-use community. Today, COVID has basically taken office use and rendered it undevelopable. If we were to continue developing outside of buildings 1, 2, and building 3, building 4, we've been out there in the last week. The pads are under construction on buildings 3 and building 4 on the west side of that. So our drivers who come in will probably start late this year or the early part of next year is what we're guessing. But those 2 buildings on the west side are going to look just like, scale-wise, just like the east side 4-story buildings. Very much bringing the grandeur of Evans Farm Drive into fruition by that. As you turn left on Market Street, which is the east-west street right here, the intention is we have similar scale, maybe three-story buildings, maybe four-story buildings, but Market Street is really the strength of the retail and the commercial area of Evans Farm. The entry drive is really not intended to be the best. The best, if you go to Hyde Park down in Cincinnati, Hyde Park has the park in the center of the street. That's the core of Hyde Park. There's commercial on either end, but the Hyde Park, that street, I can't remember the name of the street. Erie. I thought it was Ohio. But from Cincinnati, he's been there once or twice.
My grandmother lived there.
As the market sits today with the office, there is no market for office at all. So if we were to develop Market Street, it'd be one-story retail and that'd be it. Going from four-story to one-story. To use I won't even use architectural terms, I'll use a landscape architectural term. It's very wonky. It's bad, it's very poor design, it doesn't fit. It is not the town center the Township wanted, it's not the town center that we promised. In order to move on that, we have to have another use above the retail to make it work. The more multifamily we have, the more successful the retail is going to be. And that's been proven in a lot of studies and people we've spoken with. Our intent and our expectation is the office market will come back sometime before we're finished.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I hope so. but in the meantime, the residential allows us to have an adequate space replacement for the office. And that was the purpose for requesting the additional multifamily, is to allow us something to replace with. And there's even a scenario, and if it's designed the right way, I'm not the architect to know, but I've seen it where they can take multifamily and convert it back to office space as it goes to. And that may well happen, I don't know. I'm not very good at predicting the future.
Yeah, that was one of my questions I was going to ask you, whether or not you had that flexibility with the previous section.
I think that's what we all are at.
Walking through the apartments in buildings 1 and 2, if you ever want to tour, that's really pretty cool. It's in the fourth story down. It's the highest point in Orange Township. It's pretty sad when the 4 stories is high. That's what we're supposed to do. But if you walk through there, you can see how those spaces would be converted back to office. So there's that flexibility. But that's why we asked for the increase in the multifamily. And it's back to building the mixed use, it's promoting mixed use. It's not replacing it all. We're not going from office to multifamily. It's combining the two to mixed use type of use. In regards to that and answering Michelle's question, the types of multifamily, our intentions have always been that Market Street and Evans Farm Drive would be retail on the first floor and other uses above it. And we remain with that completely. The only multifamily use on the first floor is the doorway to get to the elevator and the stairs, and get upstairs. So the retail is the basis, the foundation of our town center, if you will, and the foundation of Evans Farm Drive too, and Market Street. So I'm not sure, did I answer your question, Michelle, adequately, or do you have other questions on that?
I think just when I look at the original, because the original text, it was, again, a little more complicated. Tony and I talked about how we don't need, have 20 different sections and different criteria for each section, but it does break down the amount of units in each of the sections. So I think, from a comparative standpoint, what are we looking? Are we looking at, I guess, what's the significant, or how much of an increase would we be expecting with the way this is proposed today?
I don't have an answer for you, and I'm not sure there is such an answer. I can give you a comparison, the buildings 1 and 2 that are under construction and pretty moving wire, I mean, they're drywalling it now, so they're getting pretty close. Buildings 1 and 2 have 52 multifamily units. They're predominantly 2 bedrooms. Some of them are one bedroom, and a couple of them are 3 bedroom as well. And I think the 3s and the 1s are equaled out, so the average is maybe 2 bedroom units. In that comparison, we'll probably have pretty close to 52 on the west side. I would say probably a few less because we have Market Street dividing them. So if we took that footprint and turned it maximum, if you went all multifamily, no other uses on the 2nd through the 4th floors, that would probably be a pretty good estimated number of a maximum unit. I don't see them being much smaller as far as square footage goes. I mean, I think the development team, I say that the architect and the marketing agent and the real estate folks, they went through a pretty lengthy discussion and study of the square footages of those units and what would be desirable in Orange Township and all TNG schools. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think from my perspective, I understand the pandemic and, office space is not in demand at this time.
Right.
I emphasize trying to be clear on understanding the density, mainly because we do have 2 new board members here, and then the trustees will most likely bring that up at the meeting.
So
Are you, go ahead.
So what we're saying is we're not specifying what the density is going to be from above floor 1. It's just open-ended. Is that what you're saying?
Evans Farm has been kind of a really interesting predicament, one that I've never been involved with in 30 plus years of planning. Our restrictions are more related to the 50-foot height building and the amount of parking. And that drives the densities of everything. And with that, and that's part of the reason why we got, the first time through, we requested approval and got it for a parking garage, because we knew the parking was going to be a premium. And the 4 stories of parking garage is going to be enough to accommodate the multifamily and the commercial retail in that area, and the office in that area.
And on the commercial retail, I don't think we aren't limited in our original text and our approvals on any kind of square footage on the commercial area. It's really all driven by parking, which certainly the office uses and the apartments above them. So if you took the 2 Evans Farm and Hyatt and said there's 10 buildings in there and you went 3-story or 4, and you didn't do any office, you can probably calculate what it might be, but you're probably half of that, and then part of that is what we're already zoned for anyway. It's done. I guess it's okay.
And we're just talking about for the planned commercial.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We're not changing any.
you're not changing anything.
Zoning at all.
Yeah, it's the same flexibility we talked about last week. Okay.
Signage matrix, I think we may have already started to address it. The matrix and the text work together. The matrix, if the zoning commission likes the format, we can leave it in there. If you want it back with the signage area, we can add it back there. But the intention was, much as the setbacks in section 2 for the development are in there, another spreadsheet with just the signage details as far as measurements was in there, and I put it there only because section 2 had one spreadsheet already, so we added another. Had to do with setbacks and areas and things like that. So those 2 are both in the text in section 6, and the matrix or spreadsheet in section 2 are proposed for the zoning text in this amendment. And I have a written again matrix and text that I address both of those issues. Michelle? Okay.
Then we're going to change it to permanent required on the conditional.
Oh, yes, yeah,
That-
and then I think, if you're referring to the other matrix question, it was the temporary
Yeah,
events.
that's,
so.
okay. And then we also are gonna add, we'll put back in the reference to the gym and sports parking.
Okay.
Temporary events still apply. You asked if we're going to make applications or submit to the township, yes. So,
And we'll do quarterly. I'll tell you quarterly what we're
Okay,
doing, send out.
but if,
for reoccurring events.
Yeah.
in the alley widths you had a question on, and we're going to withdraw that, we'll continue to pursue that, but not having worked with the state fire marshal's office, but having worked with other state agencies seem to take a little bit of time. And we'll just, if it takes a month or two or 3 or 4, whatever it takes, when we get our approval, we'll be back to amend it just for that. And
We would think we would get it. We're supported by the Forest Township guys.
any other discussion?
Michelle, I think when we talk on satellite dishes, we as a township really want to be a part of that. Is that
Yes.
what we reached from it? Okay.
You want us to strike all that?
No. I mean, no, we're,
I'm all for, I've got my Excel, I got it down to 35 pages.
so my understanding is it's
I
going
just
to
didn't
be,
want to be held accountable for it.
correct, so it's going to be regulated by
Yeah.
your
By all.
architectural,
Part of the
yes.
architectural.
And that's the way we want it.
Yes.
And that's what, okay.
That's the way it should be.
We received today, actually I received it yesterday, the emails from a neighbor, and just wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. We've already said, he made a point typically, and there are some good points made here, that typically if you're rezoning or amending you're changing it from something to something else. The duplexes are not really that, they are simply an opportunity for us to promote diversity again. And mixed use is basically the same use, but a mixed, another opportunity to serve another market, whether it's my parents who are downsizing or my kids moving in from college with a new family that want to come in and they can't afford the $500,000 3-pillar home that just looks fantastic. There's an opportunity to get into something a little bit smaller, something a little bit more affordable, architecturally and quality-wise. It's still very much in keeping with everything at Evans Farm. And we used the houses down on Como off of High Street in Clintonville is a great example. It's something very near to my family. They just make a lot of sense and something we would like to continue to pursue if the zoning commission is willing to give us approval on. We have not compromised. We still have maintained the 35% open space that the township has approved already. We required to get 20%. We proposed 35%. We've not varied from that. So we're not requesting any changes to that. We're just adding something else as a mixed use type of, or mixed market type of use. The second item that I went through was the PCD multifamily inclusion. Again, this is what we just talked about, promoting the more mixed use type of environment for the retail areas that market today and for the foreseeable future. The office market is off, and to allow us to keep moving on that and to fill out the rest of the town center, or until the market comes back, anyhow, keep moving through the town center. We're asking for the multifamily in there. We'll keep working on that. The alleys, his point was it was removing right-of-way. The alleys aren't in the right-of-way. There's no increase in any square footage. Alleys throughout are not required anyhow. They are part of the design of the community. And quite honestly, and I think I mentioned it last time, Andre Swanee, who's the founder, he and his wife, Elizabeth Players-Everett, they're the founders of New Urbanism, beat the snot out of me one day about finding out that the alleys were 20 feet wide. And that doesn't mean anything to you guys, but it's tough to be berated by the founder of the industry. Alleys, and I grew up down in Linden, and the alleys down there, some of them, you could almost lay side to side. We found a couple instances locally where 15, 16 foot is a standard alley permitted, and that's what we've worked with and met with Chief McNeil and Lieutenant Clark on. They've agreed to work with us on time for the variance, but we'll deal with that later, if you will. Last thing is the traffic impact. And we've had numerous conversations and contacts with the county engineer over the whole course of the project. We've come to an agreement, development agreement where, how many millions is it? 58, 54?
Yeah, we talked with him this morning at 9. He's working on something with Kevin on a draft of a approval to say, look, we don't need a new traffic study. The way we've designed all the exterior offsite infrastructure, and by the way, charged you, Evans Farm, $58 million to build that offsite infrastructure. None of that's affected by any increase in density that we walked it through, and I guess Kevin is going to draft something up for him.
Yeah, I'll back up. My name is Kevin Kirschner. 7965 North High Street, Columbus. Yeah, we did meet with Rob Riley this morning and on another matter, and this came up because we did receive this question from the resident. Just put it in context, there's, depending on how you count the discussion of the PCD residential units, there's roughly 2,400 units or livable units in the development. We're adding 100 to that. So it's less than 5% when you're talking about trips. The overall comprehensive study looked at the regional area, and out of that came 9 major projects that added up to somewhere $48.5 million. Some total.
48 at the time, 58 at the time of execution.
Yeah. So from a traffic analysis standpoint, when you take those additional 100 units and then distribute them in whatever direction they're going, it's not going to change the results of its non-major projects, nor will it change the results of any internal roadway that we've already put out. I think generally the county engineer agreed with that. Once we get, if we get approved this evening and we move forward with the location and details of where these multi-family units will be located, if it's warranted at that time, we will remember to update our traffic distribution in that area would possibly change in what the county engineer at the time. But we wouldn't be doing a traffic study.
We actually, I think Christine was here, and we actually had our engineers back in 2016 do a regional study for the benefit of the county and all of us, right? We saw this growth happening, and we figured, what the heck, we'll jump in here. Little did we know that jumping in there to help cost us $58 million, but we accepted those discussions, and so we did a pretty comprehensive study of the region, not just Evans Farm, which we're not, we're a team player with you guys.
What about the trails? I mean, we've gotten some residents called about the status of the trails, especially on your main corridors.
Are you talking about the trail in front?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they've put the right in, right out now, coming in the back, and now it's just a matter of finishing up grading and getting the parking lot approved. imagine,
I thought the trail was supposed to come in on the Wilson Road, like,
three levels, yeah.
another one.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
And does that include, just so I know, does that include the part where the cove, the trail for the cove too? That'll be until the widening?
I don't know if they're going to hold off on that. They may.
Because the cove's pretty far or away from the right of way, so.
The code multi-use path is that top,
Okay.
which they're under construction now. We'll hopefully get the first
Yeah.
phase in the corner done in April.
Okay.
I'm sort of back on the duplex issue, if I may be so bold to comment. Yeah, I have no problem with the additional 100 in the scope of this complex. That's not going to change the density that much when you look at the whole Evans Farm and the 500 acres that it is. The question I do have is they will be part of the single-family planned district. And we had talked about last time about having them located sort of as a buffer between the single family and between the multifamily area.
In the
In the overlay area. But I don't see this unless I overlooked it in the text. And so I guess what I don't want to see is someone, buying a big lot, building a $1 million house, and then complaining that they have a duplex next door to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to address that, but like I said, I know we thought that an ideal location would sort of be as going from a more dense to a less dense area would be appropriate for them. But I don't see that in the text. So can you sort of comment and address that issue? And I don't know how other people on the commission feel as well, but that's my concern.
I wonder if we don't, we could take it into the land use description, have a look at proximity of X number of feet within X number of feet of the planned commercial area of the oval or something like that.
Or use adjacent to.
Or whatever. All I know is, like I said, I was looking at this chart on page 2 of permitted land uses, and they're permitted, but it doesn't exactly say where. So for me, it implies it could be anywhere, which then makes me a little nervous, because I also don't want like one duplex here and then one duplex,
We wouldn't do that anyway.
5 blocks away and another, I would want them sort of to be in a general region and not scattered throughout.
One kind of surprised that wasn't already in there from the start.
We had talked about it.
That's true. I already assumed that it was.
Yeah, so we had talked about it, but,
I mean, honestly, because just listening to this, I'm talking, I'd already assumed that was already in there as far as.
where they would be located and how it would work.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that they would already arranged, because everything else was been so organized. So you think that's interesting, I like to comment on that.
So that was just, like I said, that was just my,
I'm sure that came up during the original zoning.
we talked about it during the original zoning, but because of the issue with the duplexes.
We just
Do you specify you have pods?
Yeah,
That's
we
what
just
I was saying, if we said the
adjacent to
duplex pod was adjacent to the plain commercial area, the oval plain commercial area, I think that would.
Well, I think kind of was the bigger issue, which I'd already assumed was there, and I'm still convinced that it probably is, because you gentlemen have always been so well thought out and well planned that you already would have had to have planned just the densities of all of Evans Farm from start all the way back to the larger single family.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be correct? And so you already would have had to have designated those areas and those properties to some level. I'm just not sure how you
If you use the term density, and that's probably the easiest way to use that is, I don't want to get into transits again, but
Please don't.
the oval area is geographically pretty much the center, and if, just for reference, the oval area is the center. If we came in and it was adjacent to this area here, over here, or over on this side, and if we wrote it in there that the duplex pod was adjacent to the oval PCD area. That would probably get you what you want, because it's going to keep the density of the duplexes closer to the density of the oval area.
And I mean, we all have seen it, you know, as you said, we've planned it, we've looked at it. We literally know that the only place you could do them, if the market demands it, is around this. You can't start heading that way too far, because you're gonna have $1 million homes, and I live there. So, I can tell you, and Tony will be moving there, so we aren't gonna be doing anything.
This kind of question a little off track, but especially with duplexing, you described Clintonville. I'm well familiar with those and the alleys, because it requires the alleys to serve those because you have detached garages.
Because you don't have the lot width to have an
Well,
attached
exactly. You got
garage.
smaller lots and a detached garage. Is your current market accepting that versus?
Oh, yeah.
You know, they are.
Okay.
And I.
We have a couple, or you guys have a couple of detached garages already, so.
And even if they're not detached, and this is something that I would expect, well, I guess I should have expected it here too, but what they'll do instead of a detached garage is they'll put like their laundry room, and they'll extend it down, so you end up with a bowling alley kind of room.
You have a breezeway.
Breezeway, right.
We have a couple breezeways too.
So that's the house I live in right now. My house has that. It's where I keep the cats. This group won't live in the house. But it's in the breezeway to go to the garage. And then we've had Tom Hewitt's house, $1.2 million. It has a detached garage with just a covered walkway. And then it goes all the way to the 3-pillar guy house that literally has the detached garage and a pool in between the house. That I'm surprised, because a bunch of people have wanted to buy that, and I'm thinking, what about the winter when you got your groceries?
You get to walk on the wall.
Yeah, but yeah, it's been accepted, and I think that's all part of what we've all created here. Diversity in people's opinion of living together in different atmospheres. Right?
So I have another tangent on that. Since I'm really glad we're having these discussions, because of there's so many things that I think of from it. Model homes, I just noticed that was not in this.
I was going to bring that up. There's 2 things on that in the redlining I came across.
Okay, I was starting to skim through it, so,
Yep.
And I think these will serve, valuable for, us to review, and I think we'll be able to catch everything.
We're open to reviewing tonight.
We'll be reviewing them for the next 20 years.
I told you I was wearing comfortable.
We all know that this isn't going to be the last time. We're all going to be flexible to work to make sure this turns out. For Town Center, we got started 8 years ago. And it is looking good. It's amazing. All our new included street sign poles are coming in, so we get rid of those temporary metal ones. It's looking really good. Are you going through your red line?
I'm excited.
I'd like to know why ours aren't red line.
Someone asked me the original, got pushed the color button. Sorry.
Well, Tony, before we start on that, just to close the loop on Michelle's original comments, and maybe I missed this, and sorry if I did, but Jennings Sports Park, or is that something that's in here that you're going to discuss in these red
We
lines
can
here?
discuss it. How would you like that included in here as part of the open? It's one of the many open space, one of the many parks. How did you want that incorporated in? I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
What's the current tax state? I mean,
It
what we're
was-
doing now is we're developing the text that's going to exist. So if it's not in here, then
The current, what
In your current text, we had to go through, and I can't remember how many parks there were 45 parks or something like that. And we were supposed to identify the acreages of each, the uses of each, the maintenance of each, and who owned which. And one of the first things Michelle and I decided to do was to get rid of all
I think it needs to be included, especially because there's, some very large structures involved, and it was quite the process to get that through too. So I guess whatever the language was originally, I don't see why it would be an issue.
It was originally labeled as open space A, which will come across in our approved text.
Well, I'm saying with the amendment, when we did the amendment for Jennings, because that was modified.
Yeah.
I think it was still defined as, I wouldn't necessarily say open space A, or, Jennings Sports Park is a permitted use in the open space area.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Okay.
There's X amount of structures, lighting's
We'll go back to the
80, the light poles, all that, so.
Yeah.
Because I know the lighting is a big
Yeah,
deal,
I mean,
so.
we spent a lot of time working out the lighting,
Yeah.
the structures, trying to make sure what potential impact on the surrounding
Just
community
insert
would
that
be.
back in.
So
Yeah, that's
after
all. That's
that
my
work-
point.
And I think, and that's, I
That's
mean,
lawyer speak.
Whatever it was, just stick
Yeah.
just
We don't want to lose all that work.
No, and just to reiterate, I mean, when I started to skim through this, I mean, the model homes, I mean, again, that's not in this revision, so whatever is, if this is going to be the new text, we need to make sure everything is transferred, that's what we're gonna be enforcing moving forward, so.
What caused me, I woke up with this morning, which is just very warped. Everything about it's warped that you wake up with in your head. But the second item on the red line in the single family plan residential, the accessory buildings, is not referred to in the new text. And it should be in there, even if it's under one of the conditions of the single family uses, it should be in there as a permitted, because if you have a detached garage like several are used to, or a couple of them have, this is a phenomenon I didn't expect, with a golf cart shed, but it architecturally fits. It's all the standards, it's all the setbacks. It's an accessory building as well, so those need to be in there, and that's what caused me to think of the model. Models in there too, so we'll add model as a line item in the single family plan residential, and we'll also include the accessory buildings in there too. Accessory uses.
Yeah, I think at least from staff, to complete our review, I would like to review this thoroughly and compare it to what is provided in the revised text and provide feedback after that. And I know we're trying to go, I don't know if it's realistic to go through page by page. This is a couple hundred pages of text, so.
Oh, it's only 150.
But, I think.
I put 2 pages on one sheet, so it's half of it.
So I think from our perspective, what we need to figure out is Michelle's list that she had, plus the additional comments tonight, what needs to be added to this red line copy. And I'm not running the truth, going through all this tonight. There just seems to be a lot that needs to happen. I also am sensitive to Tony's timeline. I understand there's a sense of urgency from their perspective. So I'm trying to think of a compromise here in terms of not making them wait for the next month's meeting, but maybe giving Michelle enough time and maybe setting a special meeting date so we can get the list that I've been trying to keep track of modifications, getting that cleaned up, not making them wait to the next time, coming up with a special meeting date, having the text as we want it, and get it, and then shipping up to the trustees as soon as possible. I don't know if that's feasible from everybody's kind of standpoint tonight. I understand. I've been doing this long enough. I understand the sense of urgency from developers, and I appreciate that. And I'm just trying to reach kind of a compromise between what I'm kind of picking up from Michelle.
It just, I think that every hour I think about this, there's something else that I forget, or if the model home thing, I just thought of that as I started skimming through this. So I just, I like the format, I like the vision. I just want to make sure we're doing this right.
And ultimately, it's up to the zoning commission. If we want to try to figure out each and every exact wording of each and every modification right here and now, paid by the hour. It's good. It's up to the will of the zoning commission. So we can certainly do that. Otherwise, my recommendation would be that we keep in mind that Tony has a time-sensitive matter. We figure out exactly how much time Michelle needs, and then we call a special meeting, or we figure out that special meeting date now, and then we can act that night. So,
yeah, I think that's appropriate. Show me some time. But they consider that time as well for special meetings. Township will Michelle on time.
Well, I have my handy dandy staff with me, so we'll power through it. And I've been typing out the comments as we've been here. So as far as what we discussed so far, I think that'll be pretty easy. But this is going to take us a few hours to really sit down and look at all the pages. So I think I can turn that.
Let me ask you this question, Michelle. I know the board of trustees has a meeting on Monday. When is the next meeting after that?
October 4th.
So we would, my preference would be that we have the recommendation to the trustees
For that one.
for that meeting on the 4th. So,
Do we have anything on the 28th?
No.
Will September 28th work for everybody, Tuesday? Michelle, does that work?
That works.
Is
If
it
it works.
possible to meet the week before, so on the 28th, we can submit revisions with all your comments in there? Instead of knowing that the trustees don't like to have a list of 20 or 30 conditions for approval.
So I was thinking,
Well, the 21st, we have a meeting. I'm out that entire week. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you guys can't do it. I'm out the 20th through the 24th.
well, I still need to have a few days to give you our comments too, and then if you want
Right.
to put the revision together prior to the next meeting, that way the recommendation would in theory
would be clean.
would be clean. Yeah.
That's my.
With the addition of the red line comments.
Yeah. My preference is always clean document. So I just want to make sure that you and Michelle have enough time to do that. But the 4th is when we need to make sure we get it to the trustee to kind of keep you moving quickly. So
The 28th or the 21st?
The 21st, you have a meeting with some connection.
The 28th.
So I'm just trying to think realistically as far as me reviewing this red line text. What would be your turnover time once I send you the comments? Can you do it overnight?
I'll speak for him. I'm his lawyer.
he did say he's wearing his comfy shoes, Michelle.
2.5 days, come on.
Sure you can.
If I can somehow get it to you by the end of this week.
I'll have it ready for you I'll have it to you.
On Tuesday, the 21st.
Yeah, pretty close to then anyhow, yeah.
I'll stay at your house. I'll stay at your house. You stop. That's
Yeah, and then on the 28th, we can, assuming everything's hunky-dory, we can get the recommendation out. Or. Hunky-dory.
Exactly.
I was born in northern National County, way out of the country.
And I really appreciate you all putting this together because I think this will clarify it all, so.
Like I said, it wasn't on my mind, and you and I talked about it pretty extensively. How do you take something where you took 6 different sections and you boil them down into one text? And how do you redline all that? That's pretty close to impossible. What we were able to do was say, okay, this section, parking went to section 6. And then we went through, and if there were line items in there that we recognized were bad, or we deleted, put it next to them or something like that. And some of them I made comments on the side, you have to see. But things like the accessory use in the model, it was like, yes, it was worth the effort, even though I complained the whole way.
And, you know, 'cause
Hey, you heard me complain.
the goal for all this is that they don't, I mean, as much as we like seeing them, they don't have to come every year, so.
The alleys. We warned you already. No, but it really is a good exercise, and I think with the spreadsheets and the consolidation of the text, I think it's even, and it doesn't make sense, but it does. 35 pages of zoning text in this little black binder is far more powerful than the 2. We have orange binders in the office, and the orange binder is that thick, and that's just the Orange Township side. We also have a Berlin, which is yellow, which is the same size.
And we always, I mean, for the last 6 years, I mean, drafting all this stuff, and finally Tony will call and say, will you look at it? And we can find something, and then.
Anybody on the board has comments, questions, or anything? When do we need to get those to you by? So you have time to.
Probably by the end of the week.
By the end of this week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note.
And then you're gonna someone needs to make a motion to continue the public hearing.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was gonna do right now, unless there's anything else. No?
I don't have anything else.
All right, can I get a motion to continue the rezoning application ZON-21-05 and ZON-21-06 Evans Farms Plan Commercial District and Single Family Plan Residential District to Tuesday, 9/28/2021 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Pierce to continue applications number ZON-21-05 and ZON-21-06 to Tuesday, September 28th at 7 p.m. Second by Mr. Bellis. Those voting, Mr. Pahovich,
Yes.
Mr. McNulty,
Yes.
Mr. Bellis,
Yes.
Ms. Harris, yes, and Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.